"You saved me once," the woman said softly, her luminous violet eyes fixed on Daniel as if she had been searching for him across the entire galaxy. Daniel blinked. For a moment he was certain she was speaking to someone behind him. Unfortunately, the corridor behind him was completely empty. "Sorry," he said after an awkward pause, lifting the crate he had been carrying slightly higher in his arms. "You must have the wrong human." The alien woman didn't move. The long silver folds of her cloak hung perfectly still, as if gravity itself respected her presence. Beneath the hood, faint lines of pale light traced delicate patterns across her skin, almost like living constellations beneath glass. And she was still staring directly at him. Daniel shifted his weight. "Look," he added carefully, "I definitely remember meeting someone who glows." The woman opened her mouth to respond, and then the entire corridor erupted with the sound of blaster fire. The first shot struck the wall beside Daniel's head with a violent crack of blue energy. "DOWN?" the woman snapped. Before Daniel could even process the situation, she moved with impossible speed. A thin metallic device unfolded from her wrist with a soft mechanical bloom, projecting a shimmering shield that expanded outward just as three armored figures stormed into the corridor. The shield caught the next volley of energy blasts with a deep humming vibration. Daniel instinctively dropped the crate and dove behind a cargo container. "What is happening?" he shouted. The armored aliens advanced cautiously. They were tall, well over 2 meters, wearing dark segmented armor that curved around their bodies like the shell of some enormous insect. Their eyes glowed faint amber behind transparent visors. Imperial hunters. Even Daniel knew what those looked like. And Imperial hunters rarely appeared on the quiet outer trade station of Helios Gate unless something very important was being chased. One of them raised his weapon again. "Princess Elira," the hunter said calmly through an amplified helmet speaker, "your escape attempt has concluded." Daniel slowly peeked over the crate. "Princess?" He looked at the glowing woman. She did not look amused. Her shield flickered again as another blast struck it. "I would advise," she said coolly, her voice suddenly far colder than before, "that you reconsider the situation." The lead hunter tilted his head. "You are surrounded." "You are," she corrected. Daniel blinked again. "Wait," he whispered to himself. Did she just? A pulse of brilliant silver light exploded outward from the woman's wrist device. The corridor lights flickered violently. The hunters staggered backward as the shield expanded and slammed into them like a kinetic wave. Daniel stared. The woman stepped forward through the fading glow with calm precision. "Daniel," she said. He froze. "Yes," he said slowly. "You should run now." "Okay." He did not argue with that suggestion. Daniel scrambled to his feet and bolted down the corridor. Behind him, the station erupted into chaos. Helios Gate was not designed for combat. It was designed for trade. Long circular corridors filled with gravity stabilizers, cargo lifts, alien merchant stalls, and diplomats arguing about tariffs in 12 different languages. Normally, the station smelled faintly of synthetic coffee and engine coolant. Tonight it smelled like burning plasma. Daniel skidded around a corner and nearly collided with a tall alien merchant whose skin shimmered faint green under the emergency lights. The alien stared at him. "Human Daniel," the merchant said in surprise. "Not a good time," Daniel said breathlessly as he ran past. The merchant leaned sideways, watching him sprint down the corridor. "Why is the royal heir chasing you?" Daniel froze mid-stride. He slowly turned back. "What?" But the merchant had already retreated into his shop and sealed the door. "Fantastic," Daniel muttered. Of course, the entire station now apparently believed he was being hunted by alien royalty. Behind him, another distant explosion echoed through the metal corridors. Then footsteps approached. Daniel turned. The glowing alien woman appeared at the end of the hallway, walking calmly toward him as if she had simply finished a quiet evening stroll. Her cloak fluttered slightly behind her. Not a single scratch marked her skin. Daniel raised a hand. "Before anything else happens," he said carefully, "I just want to clarify something." She stopped a few meters away. "Yes." "I am a cargo systems technician." She nodded. "I fix broken loading drones." Another small nod. "I once got promoted because I successfully untangled 3 delivery robots that tried to marry each other." Her expression didn't change. "So," Daniel continued, gesturing vaguely toward the smoke drifting down the corridor, "I feel like there's been some kind of cosmic misunderstanding here." For the first time, the alien woman smiled. It was a small smile, but it carried an odd warmth. There has been no misunderstanding, she said quietly. Daniel rubbed his face. That's somehow worse. She stepped closer. Up close, the strange glowing patterns beneath her skin shifted gently like distant nebulae. Her violet eyes reflected the emergency lights in soft, liquid flashes. Several passing aliens had stopped at the far end of the corridor. They were watching. One of them whispered something. Another stared openly. Daniel followed their gaze. They weren't looking at her. They were looking at him, which made absolutely no sense. The woman spoke again. You helped me once. Daniel sighed. We've established that part. You saved my life. I would definitely remember that. You would not, she said softly. Daniel frowned. That's a weirdly confident statement. She studied his face for a long moment, almost like she was confirming something. Then she said something that made Daniel's stomach drop. You did not know what I was when you helped me. Daniel opened his mouth to respond, and stopped. A strange, distant memory flickered somewhere in the back of his mind. Rain, a small rural colony world, a figure collapsed in the dirt. But the memory was foggy, years old, impossible. The woman watched his expression carefully. You remember something, she said. Daniel shook his head slowly. No, he said, then he hesitated. Maybe. Another explosion echoed somewhere deep within the station. The woman turned her head slightly, listening. They are regrouping, she said calmly. Daniel rubbed his temples. Of course they are. He looked at her again. Okay, he said. Let's pretend for a second that I actually did save your life at some point. She waited. Why are heavily armed Imperial hunters chasing you across a space station? The glowing woman was quiet for a moment. Then she answered in a tone that felt far heavier than the corridor around them. Because, she said, my existence has become inconvenient for several very powerful empires. Daniel stared at her. Of course it has. Another group of aliens down the corridor quickly stepped aside as two station security drones floated past, scanning the area. Their sensors briefly paused on Daniel, then on the woman beside him. Both drones immediately powered down and slowly drifted away. Daniel watched them leave. Did the station security just surrender? The woman's faint smile returned. Yes. Daniel sighed deeply. Well, he said, that seems healthy for everyone involved. He looked back at her glowing eyes. So, he said carefully, if you're a princess and people with warships are trying to capture you. She tilted her head slightly. Yes. Why, Daniel asked slowly, are you protecting me? For the first time since the chaos began, her expression changed. The calm confidence softened into something more personal, something almost emotional. And when she spoke again, her voice was quieter. Because, she said, you once protected me when I was far more helpless than you are now. Daniel opened his mouth, but the words never came out. Because at the far end of the corridor, another group of Imperial hunters had just arrived, and this time they were bringing heavier weapons. The first thing Daniel noticed about the new group of Imperial hunters was that they were not walking. They were gliding. Thin anti-gravity plates hummed beneath their armored boots as they floated down the corridor with slow, deliberate control, like predators that had already decided how the hunt would end. Their armor was darker than the previous squads, almost black, and thin lines of red light ran through the joints of their suits. Their helmets were more angular, their weapons larger, very large. Daniel squinted at one of them. That, he said quietly, looks extremely illegal. Beside him, the glowing woman, Elira, did not respond. Her violet eyes had narrowed slightly as she studied the approaching soldiers. One of the hunters raised a weapon that unfolded into a long cannon-like device humming with unstable energy. Daniel swallowed. That definitely looks illegal. The lead hunter stopped roughly 20 meters away. His helmet retracted with a smooth mechanical shift, revealing pale metallic skin and narrow golden eyes that looked almost reptilian. Thin ridges ran along his temples where bone met metal implants. He studied Elira first. Then his gaze moved slowly to Daniel, and stayed there. His expression changed. Not anger, not even hostility, confusion. Princess Elira, the hunter said calmly, your continued resistance serves no strategic purpose. Elira did not move. I disagree. The hunter sighed softly. You always did. His gaze returned to Daniel. The hunter tilted his head. A human. Daniel raised a hand slightly. Hello. The hunter studied him more closely. Then something even stranger happened. The hunter's eyes flickered briefly with recognition. Not certainty, but recognition. Curious, he murmured. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. I get that reaction a lot. Another hunter leaned slightly toward the leader. Their armor transmitted the whisper through an external speaker. Commander, that human matches partial data in the Royal Intelligence Archives. Daniel blinked. The what now? The commander ignored him. His eyes remained locked on Daniel as if he had suddenly become the most interesting object in the corridor. Elira noticed, and for the first time since the fight began, she stepped slightly closer to Daniel. Not behind him, beside him, protectively, the movement did not go unnoticed. Several nearby aliens watching from the corridor gasped quietly. Daniel followed their gaze. Across the hallway, a group of tall merchants with long, translucent ears were whispering rapidly. One of them pointed at Daniel. Another covered his mouth in shock. Daniel leaned slightly toward Elira. Are they talking about me? Yes, she said. Why? Because, she replied calmly, this is the first time anyone has seen me stand beside someone rather than above them. Daniel blinked again. Oh. He paused. That feels politically complicated. The Imperial commander slowly folded his hands behind his back. Princess, he said, I am willing to overlook your previous escape attempts. However, his gaze drifted again to Daniel. The human complicates matters. Daniel raised a finger. I would like to formally agree with that statement. No one laughed. The commander stepped forward slightly, his anti-gravity plates humming. Human, he said. Daniel sighed. Yes. What is your name? Daniel hesitated. He had the sudden, overwhelming feeling that giving his name to heavily armed Imperial soldiers might somehow make the situation worse. But then again, the situation already involved alien royalty, Imperial hunters, and weapons capable of turning corridors into plasma clouds. So he shrugged. Daniel. The commander nodded slowly. Daniel. He said the name carefully, like he was testing the sound of it. Behind him, another hunter spoke quietly. Commander, the historical files from the Cathara incident reference a human with that name. Daniel frowned. The what incident? Elira remained silent, but Daniel felt her attention sharpen slightly beside him. The commander's golden eyes remained locked on Daniel. You once lived on a human colony world designated Delta 9. Daniel shrugged. Yeah, small farming colony, lots of rain, terrible coffee. The commander's expression darkened. 5 years ago, a covert diplomatic vessel from the Orenthian royal house was attacked near that world. Daniel blinked. That sounds like a very bad day. It was. The commander stepped closer, and suddenly the entire corridor felt smaller. A survivor from that vessel was found injured on the planet's surface. Daniel rubbed his neck. Okay. The commander leaned forward slightly. A witness report from that time states that a local human assisted the injured individual. Provided shelter, medical care, protection. Daniel stared at him. People do that. The commander's eyes narrowed. Yes. A long silence filled the corridor. Then Daniel slowly turned his head toward Elira. Her glowing skin shimmered softly under the emergency lights. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were watching him with something far deeper than curiosity. Something that looked almost like quiet gratitude. Daniel's brain began assembling pieces of memory that had been scattered for years. Rain hitting metal rooftops. A figure collapsed in the mud, skin glowing faintly in the dark. A voice whispering in a language he didn't understand. He had assumed it was some kind of injured traveler, someone from another off-world colony. He never imagined. Daniel suddenly pointed at Elira. You were the muddy, glowing person. The entire corridor went silent. Even the Imperial hunters seemed momentarily unsure how to process that sentence. Elira blinked, then, unexpectedly. She laughed, a soft, warm sound that echoed gently through the corridor. Yes, she said, I was the muddy, glowing person. Daniel exhaled slowly. Okay. He rubbed his face again. So just to recap, he pointed at the Imperial hunters, deadly Empire soldiers, then at Elira, alien princess, then at himself, cargo technician who once accidentally helped interstellar royalty during a rainy afternoon. He looked at the commander. Am I missing anything? The commander studied him with new intensity now, not confusion. Something closer to cautious respect. You saved the life of the heir to one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy, the commander said. Daniel shrugged weakly. I gave her soup. Elira smiled again. It was very good soup. Another long silence followed. Then the commander slowly exhaled. This situation, he said carefully, has become diplomatically delicate. Daniel raised both hands. I would love for it to become less delicate. Behind the commander, one of the hunters suddenly received a transmission. The soldier stiffened. Commander, he said, speak. The fleet has arrived. The commander closed his eyes briefly. That was faster than expected. Daniel looked between them. What fleet? The commander opened his eyes again. Princess, he said quietly, 3 royal warships have just entered orbit around this station. The watching aliens gasped again. Elira remained still. Daniel blinked. Your ships. She shook her head slowly. No. Daniel felt his stomach drop. Then whose ships? The commander looked directly at him, and for the first time since they arrived, the Imperial officer looked genuinely concerned. The ones, he said quietly, that do not want the princess to survive. The station lights flickered again, but this time it wasn't from weapons fire. It was the low, distant tremor of something enormous arriving in orbit. Daniel felt it through the floor beneath his boots, a deep vibration running through the structure of Helios, gate like the station itself had suddenly become nervous. Across the corridor, several alien merchants quietly backed away. One of them whispered, warships. Another said something in a language Daniel didn't understand, but the tone translated easily enough. Fear. Daniel slowly turned toward Elira. So, he said carefully, 3 mysterious warships show up that want you dead. Yes, and we are currently inside a station that definitely cannot survive 3 warships. Yes, and I assume those guys, he nodded toward the Imperial hunters, aren't going to just let you walk away peacefully. The commander answered before Elira could. No. Daniel rubbed his face. Okay. He took a breath. Fantastic. The commander's golden eyes shifted between Daniel and Elira with visible calculation. Princess, he said slowly, this development changes the strategic landscape. Elira's voice remained calm. It does. If those ships belong to the faction we suspect, the commander continued, their objective is not your capture. No, your death. The word hung in the corridor like cold metal. Daniel looked up. Well, that seems rude. No one corrected him. The commander spoke again. My orders were to bring you back alive. Elira's eyes narrowed slightly, and now. The commander exhaled. Now the situation has escalated beyond Imperial jurisdiction. One of the watching aliens down the hallway whispered loudly. They're talking about succession wars. Another alien gasped. Daniel leaned toward Elira again. I'm starting to realize your family has very complicated family dinners. She almost smiled. Above them, the station's emergency system suddenly activated. A metallic voice echoed through the corridors. Warning. Unidentified VSSELS have entered engagement range. All civilians seek immediate shelter. Daniel slowly looked up at the ceiling. Well, he said, that feels like a bad sign. The commander turned toward his soldiers. Form defensive perimeter. The hunters moved instantly, weapons raising toward the station's main observation corridor. Daniel frowned. Wait. The commander glanced at him. You're helping us now. The commander didn't look happy about it. No. He looked toward the ceiling, where the distant rumble of engines vibrated through the structure. We are helping ourselves survive. Elira stepped forward slightly. Her luminous skin glowed a little brighter now. Commander, she said, if those ships belong to House Valtharis, they will destroy the station, he finished. The silence that followed was heavy. Helios Gate wasn't just a trading post. It held thousands of civilians, merchants, travelers, families. Daniel slowly turned his head toward the massive observation window at the far end of the corridor. Beyond the glass, the blackness of space shimmered with faint, distant stars. And then 3 shadows appeared, massive, triangular warships. Their hulls were lined with crimson lights that pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. Daniel exhaled quietly. Those are very big ships. One of the hunters muttered, battle cruisers. Daniel nodded. Of course they are. Elira stared at them in silence. Her expression had changed. It wasn't fear, it was something older, something heavier. Daniel noticed. You expected this, he said quietly. Yes. He studied her glowing eyes. Someone in your empire wants you gone. Yes, because of politics. Yes, Daniel sighed. Politics really ruins everything. Outside the window, one of the warships rotated slowly. A line of bright energy began forming along its hull. Charging, the commander's voice sharpened. They are preparing a strike. One of the hunters shouted, Impact in 30 seconds. The corridor erupted with movement. Aliens scattered for shelter. Security shutters began lowering over nearby hallways. Daniel stared at the warship. Then he looked at Elira, then at the commander, then back at the warship. Well, he said slowly. Everyone turned toward him. Daniel pointed at the window. They're not aiming at you. The commander frowned. What? Daniel stepped closer to the glass, squinting slightly. That weapon is angled too low. The commander moved beside him. His golden eyes widened slightly. The station core. Elira understood instantly. If the station core explodes, she said quietly, the entire structure will collapse. And I die without them being blamed, she finished. Daniel nodded. Exactly. The commander looked at the charging warship again. Impact in 20 seconds. Daniel exhaled slowly. Then he did something that made several aliens gasp. He stepped forward, directly in front of the observation window. Daniel, Elira said. He raised a hand. Relax. Daniel, relax. He looked back at her. I've got an idea. The commander blinked. You are a cargo technician. Yes. You fix loading drones. Yes. You untangled 3 delivery robots that attempted to marry each other. Daniel nodded proudly. Very complicated situation. The commander stared at him. You believe you can solve this? Daniel shrugged. I've noticed something about aliens. The commander raised an eyebrow. Oh. Daniel pointed behind him. You all keep assuming humans are small players in your political games. Elira watched him carefully now. Daniel turned back toward the window. Outside, the warship's weapon was seconds from firing. He lifted his station access tablet, typed rapidly. The commander frowned. What are you doing? Daniel smiled slightly. Helios Gate runs on old trade software. So, Daniel said calmly. That software still controls the station's defense beacon. The commander's eyes widened. You cannot. Daniel pressed the screen. Across the station, a massive transmitter suddenly activated. A powerful signal blasted outward into space, directly toward the warships. The commander stared at the console readings. You just broadcast a diplomatic distress signal. Daniel nodded. To every fleet within 5 light minutes. The commander's expression slowly changed. Understanding, Elira's violet eyes widened slightly. Daniel leaned casually against the window. Outside, the warship's weapon stopped charging. A new signal appeared on the commander's scanner. Then another. Then another. Dozens, ships, merchant fleets, patrol ships, diplomatic escorts. Every nearby vessel responding to the emergency broadcast. Because if a station like Helios Gate exploded, trade across 3 sectors would collapse. The warships hesitated. Daniel crossed his arms. Turns out, he said casually, blowing up a trade hub in front of half the galaxy is bad for public relations. The Crimson warships slowly powered down their weapons. Then one by one, they turned and retreated into the darkness of space. The corridor was completely silent. The commander slowly looked at Daniel. You manipulated interstellar politics with a cargo terminal. Daniel shrugged. Sometimes the simplest tool works best. Several aliens down the corridor began whispering again, but now the whispers sounded different. Respect. Elira stepped closer to him. Her glowing eyes reflected the distant stars outside the window. You saved me again, she said softly. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. Technically, I saved the station. She smiled gently, but you did it for me. Daniel thought about that, then shrugged again. Well. He looked around the corridor full of stunned aliens, Imperial soldiers, and nervous merchants. You did save my life first. The commander studied Daniel one last time. Then he did something none of the watching aliens expected. He bowed his head slightly to a human cargo technician. You are an unusual human, Daniel. Daniel grinned. I get that a lot. Elira looked at him for a long moment. Then she spoke quietly. In my culture, she said, a life debt is sacred. Daniel sighed playfully. Yeah, we should probably stop saving each other before this becomes a very long cycle. But Elira just smiled. And for the first time since the chaos began, the station was quiet. Outside the window, the stars shimmered peacefully again, and somewhere across the galaxy, empires had just learned that an ordinary human could change the fate of royalty, with nothing more than kindness. And a cargo terminal,